Well, good afternoon, everyone. Why don't we go ahead and get started? My name's Tom Chapman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Catholic Conference. Welcome to this webinar on food insecurity in Iowa. It's really great to see so many people here from across the state, so thank you for being here. Today, we have several experts ready to cover a number of topics, including a current look at hunger in the state of Iowa, a review of our emergency food system here in Iowa, and some basic information on food assistance, the SNAP program, which people talk about as food stamps. And then also we'll be spending a little time getting you ready to contact your legislators on food insecurity public policy. So we need to finish up by 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Luke Elzinga, who is our moderator for today. Luke is Communications and Advocacy Manager at the Des Moines Area Religious Council, which runs, as you might know, the food pantry system for the Des Moines metro area. Luke's also a part of the Iowa Hunger Coalition. So Luke, why don't you go ahead and share some of the housekeeping announcements and let's get rolling.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining today. Just a couple things. We are going to try to keep everyone muted except for the person who's speaking at that time, just to cut down on background noise. This is being recorded right now, so we will be sharing that online after this session is over, so you can watch it again or share with others. If you have questions, please put those in the chat and we'll try to get all of those answered. And like Tom mentioned, we've got a number of experts speaking today. Here's kind of an outline of who will be speaking, and we do want to leave lots of time for questions. So again, please feel free to leave those in the chat. With that, I am going to turn it over to Deanne Cook with United Ways of Iowa.
Thank you, Luke. Glad to be here. Thanks everyone for spending your lunch with us. Luke, will you be advancing the slide? There we go. Okay, thank you, Luke. United Ways of Iowa is the statewide association that brings together all of the 24 United Ways serving our state to do projects we can do together, one of which was a COVID financial impact study this fall. This grows out of our ALICE work, where we're really interested in the portion of the Iowa population who is above federal poverty level but struggling to make ends meet. And we wanted to, normally 2020 would be an ALICE report year, but we knew that we wanted something a little more of the moment so we could see through data what we were experiencing in our communities. This report was conducted by the University of Northern Iowa. It was in the field in all of October. So just to give you a sense of when these answers appeared, it was after kind of the initial disruptions, but before the second wave of the virus in Iowa. We asked households about their experiences, their financial experiences before, during, and since COVID disruptions. We were really interested in looking at how COVID had changed things for folks. We were fortunate to get a really good sample. So the University of Northern Iowa has a 95% confidence level in extrapolating this sample out over the entire population. The first thing we asked about was their main concerns. And the top three reported aggregately among all respondents were what you see there: household member contracting COVID, a second wave of virus activity, and again, remember this was before that had happened, and concerns about mental health of the people in their households. But when you disaggregated the data and looked at those lower income households, paying for the basics like rent, utility, and food rose into their top three concerns. Slide please, Luke. There's tons of data. The report is in full available on our website, and you are welcome to get it there. But just to summarize for you, the main trends that we saw among our respondents were that COVID has unevenly impacted Iowa families. Those low-income families were most likely to report working in sectors like hospitality, food service, retail, that were most disrupted by COVID. Those families reported, half of those families reported loss of income or increased expenses since the disruptions. So Many of us were able to go home, turn on our computer and keep working, and that was really not the case for the ALICE portion of our population. The study highlighted how fragile many Iowans operate, how close to the edge they are. Aggregately, so all income levels, almost half reported they could not cover 1 month of expenses without income. A third of low-income residents couldn't go 1 week without income. So it really emphasized how fragile and how close to the edge those folks are living without any savings or reserve. Childcare was a huge, I think we've all seen this across many sectors that we care about. Childcare has had a huge impact on how families were able to handle the pandemic. 16% of our respondents reported either not working at all or not working as much as they could due to childcare issues. So again, that confidence level, we can extrapolate that out over the entire population of 1.5 million in the workforce in Iowa. That means 90,000 aren't working at all, and 150 aren't working as much as they could. 150,000 aren't working as much as they could due to childcare. So that's a whole lot of people who aren't able to be out there working and earning and being financially productive for their families. And finally, the newly needy. This was a term we kind of coined after we saw the trend on our 211 line of folks who had previously been financially stable and never needed to access social supports, who are now trying to navigate finding food, finding utility assistance, finding rent support, all those kinds of things that they just had not been exposed to before because there wasn't a need. So prior to COVID, 1% of households reported that their primary source of income was unemployment. That had gone up to 11% at the time of the survey. Last slide, please, Luke. And finally, just a few numbers, and I know my colleague Barb, who is after me, can tell you a lot more about what happened to food assistance during COVID, but many of our low-income respondents reported using food assistance and pantries during COVID. For unemployment, there were a lot of myths out there about how much unemployment was paying. About 50% of those who were still receiving unemployment at the time of the survey reported it only covered half their expenses per month. So either those folks were struggling in the beginning with the job that they had, or unemployment was not a replacement for their normal wages. And finally, the federal stimulus, again, some myths and some misconceptions about how that supported families. 85% of our respondents indicated that they received federal stimulus. Most used it in part to buy food, but most also indicated it didn't even cover 1 month of expenses for them. So it was an important lifeline, but it didn't last nearly as long as we may have assumed. So that's just kind of context for where Iowans, particularly low Iowa households are at since we've had all these disruptions, and how it's affected their incomes and their stability. Thanks, Luke. I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deanne, for sharing all that information. Next, we are going to turn it over to Barb Prather with the Iowa Food Bank Association.
Okay, next slide, please. Greetings, I'm Barb Prather. I am the chair of the board of the Iowa Food Bank Association. In my regular role, I'm the director of the Northeast Iowa Food Bank in Waterloo. And it's a pleasure to be here today to share with you just a short synopsis of what happened in the last year and what the need looks like in Iowa. The Iowa Food Bank Association represents 6 Feeding America food banks in the state of Iowa, who are serving about 1,200 pantries across the state. As you can see from the map, there are the 6 food banks and what areas that they cover. The Northeast Iowa Food Bank in Waterloo, the Haycap Food Reservoir in Cedar Rapids, Riverbend Food Bank along the Bend. They also serve counties in Illinois. Central and Southern Iowa is the Food Bank of Iowa. Food Bank for the Heartland serves not only Western Iowa, but also most of the state of Nebraska and the Food Bank of Siouxland up in Sioux City. So really, we were formed to be a voice for hunger relief and create a statewide partnerships to assist people who are food insecure through our partners. In addition, we also partner with DHS to provide the food assistance hotline and outreach. In addition, just a short summary of the hotline and outreach that we do is we reach out to communities through our network, as well as the general public, to promote our hotline, where people can call in and access food assistance, also known as food stamps. We help them apply so they can get access to benefits. This map really shows you the breadth of, then shows that the whole state is covered by a Feeding America food bank, and that we partner together to ensure that Iowans have access to food. Prior to the pandemic, the food insecurity rate was just under 10%. About 1 in 10 people were food insecure in the state of Iowa. It's estimated now that 1 in 7, or almost 13% of people, are food insecure. For kids, it used to be 1 in 7 kids. Now it's 1 in 5 kids are food insecure or projected to be food insecure. And our job is really to fill the gap to ensure that people who might fall through the cracks have access to food. The food that we provide is not meant to be their only source. It's meant to be a supplement to what we do. Just a little bit about Feeding America, our national organization, known as the Feeding America Network, was founded in the late 70s because food was being wasted and people needed food. Small pantries couldn't access or handle a tractor trailer load of product, but if you bring it in and bank it or store it, many organizations can have access to it. And so they can take what's needed for their communities. And over the years, food banks have evolved from just handing out perishable or non-perishable products to quite the variety now, where most of our inventory is non-perishable that goes out in the community. And we have to be agile and adaptable to the meeting, what's happening, not only with the food sources that we're giving, but also what's happening in our community. Our top priorities are centered around, number one, ensuring that people have access to food, that food is not wasted, and ensuring that it is kept safe and it's distributed in a safe manner. That we work in collaboration with others to accomplish this. We can't do it alone. Everything that we do through our food banks is done in some form of a partnership. We continue to educate communities on the issue of hunger and how it affects people. And while what we have in common, each of us, is the Feeding America Network, we are all separate 501c3s operating differently. And then we've come together to form the Iowa Food Bank Association to form statewide partnerships to ensure that people have access to food. When the pandemic hit, all of our operations changed drastically. We also knew that we needed more resources. And as you can tell from the numbers, they really drastically went up. And what I will share today is that in fiscal year 19, the network of food banks in Iowa served or provided 33 million meals in calendar year 19. In calendar year 20, we provided over 50 million meals. That's how drastically the amount of food we distributed to help meet the need in Iowa. We were fortunate that the governor started the Feeding Iowans Task Force, which was really formed to help us access more resources. Everything from dry product to protein items, produce, all of the like, to ensure that people had access to food. They also provided assistance with additional volunteer help. We had the National Guard in a lot of our food banks, not only helping with our mobile pantries, but also helping on-site packing boxes and the like. And today we still continue some of these programs. There's going to be more protein items coming, partnering with the Iowa Department of Agriculture in the coming year. And then we are still in the process of repacking some of the bulk foods that were purchased, macaroni, rice, to name a few, that then will be distributed out through our network of pantries. When the pandemic hit, some pantries and a lot of our agencies did close, but a lot of them did change how they operated and went to a curbside distribution. We also added additional mobile pantries to meet the need, and if a food pantry needed extra help with distribution, we helped them figure out a way to do that. What we learned here in Waterloo, because we do operate our own pantry, is that every day is different. And we wanted to make sure that people were kept safe, not only from, from each other, but that they also had the access to the food that they needed. So we were giving out more food here locally, so they wouldn't have to come out as often. We partnered with DHS early to waive our signature requirement and just give a verbal attest to the need, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't passing pens back and forth. So we worked to make sure that things were done as safely as possible and people had access to food. Decisions change daily in the early days and to some degree now. A lot of pantries are still curbside, some are, maybe not. Because we want to make sure that people still feel comfortable coming to get food. Volunteers has been a spot that some food banks have lost resources because they're rely on groups, and a lot of companies and groups aren't volunteering anymore or not being allowed. So we rely on individuals to come in and help us. And so we're always looking for new ways to get volunteers in here and help us. Safety was our #1 priority in ensuring that people had access to food. Also working with Iowa, the Feeding Iowans Task Force, they provided coolers and freezers to a lot of the pantries that are served through our network. One of the things I'd like to highlight, while the food bank's role is really to fill the gaps of what government sources can't provide, we operate, as I said earlier, the food assistance hotline, where people can access SNAP benefits, food stamps. And so I just want to share with you, from July to December of 2019, 4,500 people access benefits through that hotline. From July to December of 2020, 6,500 people access benefits. So that shows you the need, the breadth of the need of people getting food. Food banks and pantries step in to fill the gap where government can't provide it. Not all people who are in need qualify for government sources, and we work to ensure that all Iowans have access to food. And people who have lost their jobs, their hours are reduced, they had a medical issue, whatever it is, somebody who retires and all of a sudden doesn't have enough resources. That's why food banks and food pantries exist, to work together to make sure their communities are fed, and partner with many others. As I said too, is our network acquires the food, forms partnerships to distribute it through the communities. And first, by providing it to our member agency network, the pantries, shelters, and community meal programs we serve, but also on-site meal programs, mobile pantries, backpack programs, etc. All of it done. Our job is to ensure that people have access to food. Food insecurity is something that can be solved, and we're partnering with all kinds of organizations this year to ensure that food banks and food pantries in Iowa can achieve sales tax exemption, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then that money will be able to be put into distributing food. On behalf of the Iowa Food Bank Association and the food banks in Iowa, thank you so much for letting me share, and I'll entertain questions later.
Thank you, Barb. Yeah, just a reminder, if we had anyone who joined a little late, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of this. Next, we are going to hear from Cindy Peterson.
Hi, next slide, please. John and I represent at the Capitol United Way of Central Iowa, the Iowa Food Bank Association, and the Iowa Hunger Coalition. And anyone who wasn't around last year, there were two bills introduced in Ways and Means, Senate File 205 and House File 2103. And as Barb mentioned earlier, it was a sales tax exemption for food banks and food pantries. The language will be the same this year. Basically what that does, if you need to buy a non-perishable item, whether it be a truck, a freezer, paper goods, or what have you, you do not have to pay sales tax on that. And the money you would have spent on that can be reallocated to buying more food. And in a brief synopsis of that, we figured that it would bring 1.3 million meals, 1.3 million more meals into the lives of hungry Iowans. So Senator Carlin is running this again from Sioux City in the Senate, and in the House, Representative Salmons of Janesville and Representative Brown Powers of Waterloo, along with last year they had 41 co-sponsors, and they're working at that again this year. And Senator Carlin is also looking for co-sponsors in the Senate. The more people you have, especially on both sides of the aisle, kind of depoliticizes the bill, and hopefully that everyone would get on board. Hunger is not a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be. I hope everyone on this call, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today, but I hope everyone on this call knows who their senator and rep is. If you don't, please research that and find out who they are, get to know them. Many of them have coffees on Saturday mornings or sometime over the weekend when they're back home. Please go to those, make yourself known. If not, call them, email them, let them know who you are. They work for you, you vote for them to have this job, and they need to know that you're watching and paying attention. We're also going to be asking that everybody contact members of the Ways and Means Committee who will be the ones that will vote on this bill. It is funnel proof, which means it's not the first priority bills going through. If you know the legislative process, there's a funnel date, and any bills that don't make the funnel are cast aside and not dealt with this year. They're dead. So this is a funnel proof bill, which is all the Ways and Means Committee bills are funnel proof because they deal with money and spending. So they'll probably bring this up a little bit later in the session. But get to know your legislators, talk to them about this bill and how this tax exemption will help you buy more food and more opportunities for the people in your district. I talked with Senator Dawson this week, who is the new chair for Ways and Means in the Senate. And he mentioned the part about politicizing, that there are some people who are trying to politicize this issue. And I begged him that it was not, and he agreed, a political issue. But he also said there was conversation about an appropriation instead of a tax exemption. And the problem with an appropriation is you have to go back and ask for it every year. So we're really struggling now to make them focus on the tax exempt status and keep the appropriation off the table, because that's something we're going to have to go back and beg for every single year. I think if we can start with this tax exemption, then we can think about other ways to bring more money into the hunger arena. So I guess I just leave with you today that please get to know your legislators. Please reach out to them, give them a call, an email, ask them to support this legislation that means a lot for their districts.
Alert from Microsoft Update Assistant.
Sorry.
Microsoft Auto Update.
My computer likes to talk to me. Anyway, and if there's questions, let us know. John and I are at the Capitol every day. So if you're ever in Des Moines, look us up and we'll help introduce you to legislators. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Next, we are going to hear from Natalie Veldhouse with Common Good Iowa.
Thanks, Luke. Next slide, please. All right. Hi, everyone. As Luke said, my name is Natalie Veldhouse, and I am a policy advocate with Common Good Iowa. It's great to be here with you, and I'm here today to cover some basics about what SNAP is, how it works, and how the program has shifted during COVID-19. So I'm just going to get right into it. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, provides nutrition assistance to individuals and households who meet eligibility guidelines based on things like household size, income, and deductions. Interview and verification processes are required as part of the SNAP application process, and that's a decision that the Iowa Department of Human Services is in charge of. And SNAP benefits are administered monthly on an electronic benefits transfer card, or EBT card, which is shown here. It's important to note that SNAP is funded at the federal level and administered at the state level. This means that decisions about increasing benefits must happen at the federal level, but state legislation can change eligibility criteria, and our State Department of Human Services agency can make many decisions about how the program is administered in Iowa. And so it's important to know what level of government to engage with on specific SNAP issues. For example, we can go to the Capitol in Des Moines and advocate for an increase in the level of SNAP benefits, the Iowa legislature, until our face turns blue. But really, SNAP is funded at the federal level, so federal advocacy is needed there if you're talking specifically about the amount of benefits that are issued. Now I'm going to talk a bit about SNAP's economic impact in Iowa. SNAP ensures that Iowans get the food that they need while boosting food retailers and producers in Iowa. In December of 2020 alone, SNAP pumped more than $54 million into Iowa economies. This has a ripple effect. For every dollar spent on SNAP, $1.7 are added into the Iowa economy. And for any super policy wonks or economists out there, that's $1.73 in real GDP increase. Anyway, I'm a social worker. Now I'm going to touch on the ways that SNAP has shifted during COVID-19. I almost said 15, but I ended up saying 19 and then 15. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service has made many waivers available to expand SNAP and make it more flexible and responsive to the needs of families during the pandemic. Iowa's Department of Human Services has been very diligent in applying for these waivers and making sure that we're able to expand SNAP to Iowans during this time of need. We're very thankful for that. And here are a couple examples of these new flexibilities. Emergency allotments enable households to receive the maximum SNAP allotment for their household size. Iowa began providing emergency allotments in response to the pandemic in April. Emergency allotments have been further boosted due to a 15% benefit increase passed federally in late 2020. For example, all families of 4 now receive $782 per month in SNAP benefits, which is a monthly increase of $102 from the last iteration of emergency allotments in 2020. Another big change is the creation of the Pandemic Electronic Benefits Transfer Program, or PEBT. PEBT provides nutritional resources to families who have lost access to free or reduced priced school meals due to school closures. Through this program, families receive money on a new or existing EBT card to help fill the school meals gap. PEBT was administered last year in Iowa and has been approved by Iowa DHS for the 2020 to 2021 school year, and we should have some more information about how that will work soon. Finally, just a quick note on current food assistance use in Iowa. SNAP recipiency in Iowa was quite dynamic in 2020, climbing from 300,000 recipients in January to nearly 340,000 in May. That's an increase of 40,000 participants. However, SNAP recipiency also fluctuates outside of the pandemic, and the number of people receiving SNAP is not always a great reflection of the number of people in need. As Barb mentioned, there are people who are not being served by SNAP. And this is really showing how many people are receiving SNAP and does not reflect how many are applying for food assistance, or may not even be applying for food assistance for issues related to public charge. So we can talk a bit more about public charge in the Q&A if that's helpful, but this concludes my quick SNAP 101 overview. Please enter any questions you have in the chat. so we can answer them during the Q&A. And feel free to reach out to me if you would like to learn more about SNAP or talk about SNAP in Iowa and how it's working for you or clients at your pantry. So thanks again for having me, and thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Natalie. Next, we are going to hear from Dave Stone with United Way of Central Iowa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Stone. I'm the Advocacy Officer for United Way of Central Iowa, and we work in partnership with our food security partners. A little known program we would like to highlight is the state's Food Assistance Employment and Training Program, also known as the SNAP E&T program at the federal level. This program is housed within the Federal Farm Bill. It's administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which administers SNAP, and is implemented locally by the Iowa Department of Human Services. In short, SNAP or food assistance recipients are eligible to participate in education, training, or skills development programs offered by our community colleges or other nonprofit providers. These funds used to support the programs can be reimbursed by the USDA at 50% on the dollar, providing quality skill building opportunities for those SNAP participants, but also expanding program capacity for our providers. Last year, only 306 individuals participated in the program at the community college level, and only some of our community colleges actually participate in the program at this time. As you can see, there's only upside potential for this. Really, anyone who participates in SNAP would be eligible, and it would really promote getting those skills. Our asks for this program include expanding to all of Iowa's community colleges based on their capacity, continue to grow the number of nonprofit providers who just recently were able to start with the program, going back to over the summer and fall. We'd like to see more nonprofit providers join and be able to offer this service to SNAP participants. There are some specific requests that we have related to the program, mainly technology infrastructure, implementing the Iowa Works Food Assistance Module, which would streamline eligibility, allow better information sharing across the Department of Human Services, as well as the community college system. There needs to be some training for the providers to go along with that system so that they can accurately utilize the database and better understand the populations that we're serving. We'd also like to see an advisory board established that oversees this program with the goal of establishing a 5-year strategic plan for how to build out this program and continue to scale it. That would be a stakeholder group of food assistance partners, workforce partners, as well as the department and other entities. And finally, we would like to have some increased marketing dollars for this program to be able to promote it with SNAP participants. Right now, it's currently basically case managers at the community colleges that offer SNAP employment and training, as well as the DHS case managers who may bring this program up during interviews or eligibility recertification. But a lot more folks could know about it. At the end of the day, this program helps reduce the need for food assistance for individuals and families by helping them gain the skills they need to earn better employment and then earn self-sufficient wages. So it's a teach a man to fish situation in which we can help folks gain those skills, gain better employment, and thus reduce the need for public assistance benefits. Thank you for your time today, and happy to answer questions later in the program.
Thank you, Dave. And finally, we're going to hear from Tom Chapman again with the Iowa Catholic Conference, and then we will get to some questions.
Well, thanks for everyone to hang in there with us today. We're going to keep rolling here before we take some questions, but I really think every one of you now has the background information that you need to start doing some advocacy with your legislator. Pick one of the issues you've heard about today, and don't be afraid to use our experts that you've heard earlier today as a resource. This is my 15th session at the state capitol as an advocate, and I just want to pass along a couple pieces of information that I've found helpful in terms of helping to build a relationship with elected officials. Politics is about building relationships, and I think every one of us can do that. And so the first thing that you need to do is, you need to find out who your legislator is. And so if you could go to the reactions part of the of Zoom, give me a thumbs up if you know who your legislator is. Okay, there are several people who do. I'm glad to see that, and there are some that don't. What you can do is the easiest way to find out who your legislator is to go to the Iowa legislative website. And you can see the website on the screen there. It's legis.iowa.gov. What you'll do is click on legislators, which is highlighted in black. You'll click on legislators, and it will bring you to this screen where you can click on find your legislator. And there you can do it by school district, you can do it by zip code, city name, as you can see, interactive map. The important thing is that you need to find out who they are so you can contact them. So as Cindy said, it's time to start contacting your legislators. We'll have a bill number when the bill's introduced very soon, and it'll be very easy just to call them or email them. What I would do is I would go ahead and ask for a meeting. Some of you may be comfortable in person. Some of you will want to make a phone call or leave a message. Other people will want to email. And what I'm going to do in the chat here is I'm going to put in the numbers for the switchboard at the Iowa Capitol. There's a switchboard number for the Iowa House and a switchboard number for the Iowa Senate. You call that number and you leave a message for your legislator during the week, and 99 times out of 100, they will call you back. Just say, I'm your constituent, I'm interested in a food issue, please call me back. They will call you back. Then we can go to the next slide. This screen will kind of help you build your elevator speech. And we call it EPIC. And of course, I stole this from results.org, who use this kind of metaphor to help people sort through what they want to say to their legislators. Because sometimes it can be scary for people to contact their legislators. But here we want to make it easy that you at least have a plan for what you have to say and what feedback you can get. So the acronym is EPIC, and you definitely do not have to be an expert to do this. The first thing you want to do is engage with kind of, I would call a juicy fact. And so what we heard one today was, did you know that during this pandemic, 1/2 of the people below the federal poverty level reported using food assistance and food pantries? That's just a little fact, maybe not too surprising, but it's something that can help people draw themselves into the conversation. Then you want to identify the problem. Well, here's the problem. While there's no sales tax on groceries in Iowa, food banks still pay the sales tax on equipment they use to provide the food. That's the problem. Then you want to inform the legislator about the solution that you're proposing. Well, we're proposing a sales tax exemption for food banks when they purchase equipment that's used to provide food. So in that way, they'll have more money to provide food. And then finally, there needs to be a call to action to the legislator. And so you need to say this very clearly. I am asking you to support the exemption. What do you think? Or you can ask, what is your position on the sales tax exemption? Now, a lot of them will say, well, it's too soon to tell, or this is the first I heard about it. I need more information. And that's fine. And we can get more information. You can provide it, or you can ask one of the people on this call to help you with that. But the key thing is, after you ask the question, you've got to be quiet and listen. That's where you're going to find out the real information from the legislator. Don't help them out by giving them more information or kind of covering up the silence. Just be quiet and let them say what they want to say. And so that's the way you're going to really find out where they're at. Most important thing is to be prepared to do something when the time is right. Some of you will want to make that contact now. Some of you may want to wait until you actually see the bill number on the sales tax exemption, or if they work on an appropriation. The key is don't be afraid, find out who your legislator is, make the contact. So really appreciate your attention today. If you have any questions, you could put it on the chat. And I think we're ready to hear what people have to say on that.
Yeah, thanks again, Tom. And again, just want to encourage everyone to post your questions in the chat. I'm just going to go back. There's a couple of these that have kind of already been answered, but wondered if maybe we could answer them again out loud just so folks can see that. Daniel Hoffman-Zinnel asked, do you have any data on the number of families who did not receive the stimulus check due to documentation status or mixed documentation status.
And this is Deanne. I replied, no, we just asked about household experiences. We didn't ask about the status of members of the household. We had responses from people who were making over 200,000 because anybody could respond. So that small amount who didn't get stimulus, it was likely related to income, and we didn't ask about other reasons.
Okay, thanks, Deanne. I can also just say, anecdotally, I work for a food pantry network in the Des Moines area, and we did see an increase during the pandemic in the number of Hispanic Latinx individuals using our services, and an increase in people who were not eligible or said they were not receiving food assistance. So again, we don't ask documentation status, but we did see an increase in the number of Hispanic Latinx individuals using food pantry network here in Des Moines, and I would assume that was similar in other parts of the state as well. There was another question. I know this one's been answered too, just asking when the sales tax exemption is going to be considered. Do we have a bill number yet? I did see that Cindy replied, I don't think we do have a bill number yet. As she mentioned, it is a funnel-proof bill, so sometimes they don't kind of act on those right away. I also saw a lot of questions about, will notes be sent out? Is this being recorded? Yes, this session is being recorded, and we can certainly get notes from presenters and send something out probably on Monday of next week with some follow-up resources for you.
Luke, this is Barb. Can I just make a comment on the bill being introduced? As Luke said, it is funnel proof. It's in Ways and Means. Just from our experience over the last few years of having this bill introduced, it comes down to the last hour. Last year, it was in the final House bill. It got sent to the Senate and got ripped out. And so it was literally in the middle of the night that it went down and died. And so we just have to be, it's not something that we can raise awareness now. We've got to raise awareness through the entire session.
Yeah, great point, Barb. And we've also got people asking for a draft of the bill or the bill numbers from last year. Does one of you know that bill number from last year? I want to say in the House it was,
Yeah.
for the Senate it was 205. Is that right?
Senate File 205 or House File 2103, and I'm posting that on chat right now.
Perfect. Thank you, Cindy.
Mm-hmm.
We also had a question. Is there any other legislation we should talk with legislators about? I know the last couple of years we did see some bills that would have created barriers to some assistance programs, and wondered if anyone has seen any of those other bills we should be keeping an eye out for that relate to food insecurity. Well, I know when Dave was talking about the employment and training program, I also just wanted to make the point that that's a voluntary program, and we've seen the past couple of years some efforts to impose stricter work requirements for participation in food assistance. There are already some work requirements that exist. And so, speaking on behalf of my organization, a voluntary program is, much more preferable than a mandatory program for people using food assistance. I also wanted to point out there's one bill that I've seen that's related to an EBT card. Still trying to get some more information on that. That's in the Senate Labor Committee. I know I'm going to be keeping an eye out on that, but we haven't seen that I'm aware of any bills that specifically target the food assistance program yet. Another question, are there specific programs faith communities can support within your respective agencies as you work on hunger advocacy matters?
Luke, do you mind if I jump in on this one? And this is a little more general too, but I guess I'm just speaking for myself, but I really think that advocates for hunger, people working in, or volunteering in food pantries, people personally experiencing hunger, I really think of them as being the experts on their communities and their experiences, and our decision makers really need to hear from them. So there are a lot of different ways. I know that Tom was able to talk through some of the pieces and reaching out with your legislators, but there's also some other ways to get engaged, like sharing stories from your communities through op-eds, or like connecting with any one of us so that we can kind of take what you're hearing on the ground in your community and make sure that that's being communicated to decision makers, even if you might not feel comfortable going to the Capitol. So I think that there, either options like volunteering, doing some of that media outreach around specific policies, and then also kind of some more formal lobbying type stuff are some good opportunities. But that I don't want to scare anyone away from thinking that you have to be in a tie at the Capitol to make a difference and to communicate what's going on in your community. So yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, and this is Barb Prather, just to piggyback on what Natalie says. Yeah, getting involved in your local community, whether it's your pantry or the food bank that's in the area, really is a good way to get involved and see what happens. Pantries and food banks are always looking for volunteers. And then your people in your community the best. So I would first, reach out and educate yourself, connecting with a pantry or volunteer. And then from there, look at your relationships that you have and educate them on what you're seeing and hearing and sharing the stories. Because there's really a lot of, unfortunately for a lot of people, this year has been very, very tough. And, hearing from you is really important. Just to piggyback with talking about food assistance and what are the requirements and all of that. Just in the last couple of days, President Biden has signed some executive orders that really help get food assistance into the community that much faster. So those changes will be coming. I just got an email right before the meeting about some of them, so I don't have the information right off the top of my head. But there are changes coming, and organizations like Feeding America have a big advocacy part of what they do, as well as Food Research and Action Center, No Kid Hungry, all of them. And so there's lots of ways that you can write letters, be advocates and whatever. And what I will also say about our federal legislators, we worked very closely with them last year to get additional money for TFAP and SNAP and other programs. And they were always very willing to take a phone call from us, listen to us, and hear what the stories of Iowans. So we do have a lot of support in Congress for SNAP, food assistance, to really ensure that people have access to it. But really know too that not everybody does qualify for that, and that's where your food banks and food pantries come in.
And this is Deanne. I would just tag on to that. An important thing for you to keep in mind, it's hard. So I talked about that newly needy group. It's difficult for them to speak out. They feel ashamed. So it's important to tell their stories and tell what's happening. The other thing you get is some pushback, some whataboutism. Well, I saw a BMW pulled up at the food bank, that kind of thing. And what you need to understand about why that happens is, apart from that individual person's choices, food is the most flexible thing in a family's budget. The rent is what the rent is. The utility bill is what the utility bill is. You've got to keep a car on the road so you can work. Those are all fixed costs. Food is where families can be flexible. So that is where they cut corners. That's where they skip meals. They make less healthy choices by choosing the cheaper alternatives. They show up at Barb's distributions because that's something that they can be flexible with. So that's the first thing when you get into that rob Peter to pay Paul situation is food. So just know that when you get some pushback about the myths around people who use food assistance or food banks, because the truth is they don't qualify for food assistance. They can't get SNAP. So they've got to figure out how to do it another way. And food banks and pantries are that other way to make the rest of their budget work.
And yeah, and just again, to piggyback on that, there is plenty of food available. We just have to get it distributed the way it needs to be distributed. There's a lot of food in our country that we're trying to access to get to people, and it is available. So it's very unfortunate that people don't are food insecure.
Thank you all. I've seen there's been a few more questions come in. We had a question about kind of linking food insecurity with wellness programs, and also one about linking food insecurity with mental health. Can anyone speak on either of those? Any policy work to tie those issues together?
I am not aware of any policy issues, but what I will say from our partnerships that we have at our food bank level, we work with all of those agencies, our community health clinic, our hospitals, the mental health centers, that if they know people who need foods, we figure out a way to get it to them.
Yeah, and I would just add, at DMARC in our advocacy work, we never talk about food insecurity, existing on its own. It ties in with so many of these other issues and basic needs, issues like housing, healthcare, childcare, mental health. So I think all of these issues around poverty are intertwined, and we're focusing kind of solely on food insecurity, but obviously has intersections, with economics, with race, with a lot of different things. And so you as an advocate, that's something that you can bring up too, is those connections. We know nutrition has a big impact on mental health and child brain development, and preventable diseases. So yeah, I think it's all intertwined, and I feel like we could probably talk kind of on each of these subjects, have an own webinar for 2 hours long, and so we are trying to kind of cram a lot in. But very good point on that. Let me see if we've got any more questions. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the chat. Are you connecting with mutual aids? Is a question.
Can I clarify that? You mean other resources available in the community? Is that what you mean by mutual aids?
The question just said mutual aids. I'm not sure if that's referring to specific organizations or mutual aid collectives. We have always partnered with other community organizations to ensure people have access to food. During the pandemic, we started taking it one step further with our community action program, our Salvation Army and the county, by delivering food to people who needed it, whether they were in a motel or whether they were at home and had no transportation or anybody to get them food if they were quarantined. And so, yes, we do reach out, and we also try to provide people with lists of resources that are also available to them. Yeah, thank you, Barb. I know here in Des Moines, I know there is a mutual aid group. There's a community fridge here that's starting up. I saw someone talking about little food pantries. And that's something, that in the Des Moines area, we've definitely seen during the pandemic is groups, you know, kind of popping up to start providing food aid. And, you know, we've helped with some of those groups. I try to always, you know, stay in contact with folks of just what's going on across the community. And we'll definitely, you know, could use that help in the advocacy realm as well. I think we've got a lot of people in our communities and in our state right now who really are experiencing food insecurity, know people who are experiencing it, and want to do something about it. And advocacy is another way that you can kind of help the cause too. We've just got a couple minutes left. I've seen a lot of great stories that I haven't had time to fully read in the chat. And again, just want to encourage folks, reach out to your legislators and share with them your personal experience or the experiences of folks. If you work at an agency like a food pantry or are part of a mutual aid collective, or, you know, are working with a social services organization. Like Deanne mentioned, there's still some stigma out there around food insecurity and using food pantries and the food assistance program. If you are willing to share your story, those are some really powerful stories that legislators need to hear. But you can also, you know, share, if you're not personally willing to share that, maybe connect with a group and share your story. Ask if they could submit this anonymously as a comment to a legislator or something like that. I will say personal stories do have the most impact with legislators. And, you know, they're hired to serve us and we elect them, and part of their job is listening to their constituents. So I know my first time talking with a legislator, I was so nervous, but really they're, you know, they're human beings, and part of their job is to listen to us. So really encourage you all to reach out to your legislator, get to know them, just introduce yourself, and you know, please stay in touch with us. We'll be sending out action alerts on some of this stuff as we learn more. Anything else from any of the other presenters before we end today's session? All right, well, thank you everyone for attending. I am going to save this chat. This recording will be posted. And sorry, I'm just trying to stay up to date with the chat. I'm loving all the conversation that's happening. Thank you everyone for attending today. It's so encouraging to see so many people who are ready to stand up and speak out against food insecurity in the state. So again, thank you all for attending. We'll be following up with a recording and some more resources for you all. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks.
Thanks.